Hey guys, welcome to this YouTube channel. So today I'm going to be talking about the Fujifilm X-E4. I've used this camera for the last 2 years or so and I've enjoyed using it. This is going to be a long-term review, a heavy usage review, and everything that I have found using this camera. This review is not going to contain specific information about like sensor size, this, that, and whatever. It's going to contain information about general use of the camera, why I bought the camera, is this something that you could still buy in 2024, 2025, and just the general overall feeling of using this camera, the enjoyment factor out of using this camera. And I will be showing you some of the images as well that I've taken on this camera. So a little backstory about how I purchased the Fujifilm X-E4. I was using the Canon S650 HS for the last 10 years or so, and then I got a little bored using the camera. So this is the camera. It's a little bridge camera with a mega zoom on it, 100x digital zoom and 200 times optical zoom, I believe. Had a flash and everything. The photos were pretty decent on it, but I just started getting bored of using this camera, and I was in the market for a new camera at the time and found the Fujifilm X-F10, a little pocket-sized camera. I used that for a little while, for a few months or so. Purchased it at around 300 to 350 pounds. I used that for a little bit and then enjoyed using it, but at the same time I didn't quite like using the camera. It was a bit slow and sluggish, so I decided to have a look again in the market and see what I could find. I sold this camera for about 300 to 350 pounds, just as much as I paid for it. And I came across the Fujifilm X100V. I really liked the camera, the way it looked, and the pictures that came out of the camera, they were really nice. This was before it got really popular with TikTok and Instagram, and I kept looking at the camera and I wanted to purchase one, but it was quite expensive at the time. It was selling for about 1,200 pounds. I kept looking around in the market and then I came across the Fujifilm X-E4. So when I purchased this Fujifilm X-E4, I wanted something which was small, something which is pocketable. This camera as it is sometimes fits in my coat pocket, but sometimes I've used the 18mm lens on it, which literally looks like a lens cap. So it's as tiny as this, and this goes on just as if it's a lens cap, and you can take some pretty nice photos on this. I purchased this lens off Amazon for about 50 pounds, so it was a really affordable way to put a little lens cap on the camera, and then the camera would fit in my coat pocket very easily. I wanted something that looks good, because if a camera looks good, you'd want to pick it up and take more photographs with it. I wanted something which would feel good to use, something which had dials on them, so hear this. So yeah, so something fun like that. I wanted something with film simulations on them, because I saw these YouTubers promoting film simulations back in the day, and I wanted something which was easy to like edit directly off the camera, so I wouldn't have to spend time in Lightroom and Photoshop trying to edit pictures. I wanted something which could transfer photos directly to the iPhone and then upload it to Instagram or wherever, or send it to friends or that sort of thing. I wanted something which was budget friendly. This was a perfect camera at the time because the Fujifilm X100V prices had shot up by quite a bit, and I wanted something with removable lenses because I hadn't tried out a camera before with removable lenses, and I thought that this camera would teach me quite a bit in terms of photography because I could remove lenses and try different things. Some of the lenses that I've used on this camera are the 35mm f2 from Fuji. I've used this 18mm lens. I've tried out the 23mm f2, which I've liked the most, and I've tried out the 16 to 55mm lens on it. It's taught me a lot about photography using different lenses. Out of all the lenses that I've used, I think I've enjoyed using the 35mm the most, and then second to it would be the 23mm f2. I'll be making separate reviews on those lenses, so if you'd like to have a look at those reviews, please subscribe to the channel, and when the video's out, you'll get a notification. So yeah, so for me, photography was meant to be something fun, something which I could enjoy. I didn't like to dive into like nerdy specifications and things like that. So I wanted something which was fun, something which looked good, something which I could carry with me and just enjoy photography for what it is, just having some fun. So I'd like to talk about the build quality on this camera. The build quality on this camera I think is excellent, because I've had the chance to try out the X106 and compared it with this. So I believe this camera was made in Japan, if I'm correct. The lens for sure is made in Japan, as it says made in Japan on the lens. and I've purchased this on Amazon at the time because it was weather resistant, the lens, but sadly the camera body isn't weather resistant. I've used this camera in quite a bit of rain and in snow. I've used it in the deserts in Morocco, and I've not had any issues in terms of weather with this camera. I've used it in light rain and snow as well, and have had zero issues. So yeah, so the lens is weather resistant, but the body isn't weather resistant, just for your information. Apart from that, I think the camera is really well built. The top and the bottom is made of magnesium alloy. The buttons are very good, I would say. The buttons are quite minimal compared to another camera. These buttons are quite clicky and quite responsive, quite tacky, I would say. There have been complaints I've seen on social media where people are talking about the buttons on the camera not being enough, but I believe, in my opinion, these buttons are enough if you want to take photographs and not focus on fiddling around with different options and things like that. On this camera, the top dials are very useful. You could use them for the shutter, you could use this one for exposure compensation, you can use one for ISO. So I've set this button up for ISO because that was an option, and then I've used this for the aperture. I've mostly set this camera on aperture priority because that's how I just like using the camera, set it up and just go. So whenever I'm outside, I either go towards f2, f4 when I'm later in the evening, or it's usually on like an f8, f11 in a lot of sunshine and in the daytime. Apart from that, to make this camera more user-friendly, I have had to use a thumb grip. So I purchased this thumb grip with the camera because it just made it more comfortable to use. This is the downside of the camera, where since Fuji's tried to make it as small as possible, so I've not had like a comfortable place to hold the camera on the right side. So I've needed the thumb grip, and I think a thumb grip is essential for this camera just to make it more comfortable to hold in the hand and to use for longer periods of time. Apart from that, I think the shutter button is a pretty nice touch. I've gotten this metallic red shutter button for about £5 or £6 on eBay. You get them for quite cheap in different colors and stuff, so this is something that just makes the experience of using the camera a lot more fun. Apart from these accessories, I've also purchased a little square hood. This helped make the camera look cool. I'm all about making photography cool and cameras cool, if you can figure it out at this point. But yeah, it also helps in terms of not getting glare on the lens in harsh daylight, and it acts as an additional protection for the lens. So it just made the camera feel a bit more retro and cool. So I think, yeah, the essential accessories for this camera are the square hood, the thumb grip, and a little shutter button. If there's one accessory I would recommend you to get with this camera, it would be the thumb grip. If you don't want to get anything else, just get a thumb grip and you'd be good. The thumb grip provides the stability for using the camera one-handed, because without it, the camera feels a bit of an issue to hold just like that, and it does feel like you're gonna drop the camera at any point in time. I think the battery life is pretty good on the camera. The battery gives you about 380 to 400 shots, claimed by Fuji. I've always used this camera and had quite a lot of photographs taken with it on trips. Never really have had an issue with the battery life unless you are shooting from day to night, which I think you shouldn't be doing, because you should be enjoying a trip rather than fiddling around taking 1,000 photographs a day. So the moment you're reaching the 1,000 photograph mark, you know that you need to slow down, just take in the moment and enjoy the moment instead of just keep clicking photos away. The other selling point of this camera are the film simulations. The film simulations are really good, I would say. The film simulations basically come with Fuji. It's the same ones on the X100V or the same one on the X-E4. It's the same sensor on this camera, so you basically get all the same photograph styles and the qualities from the other cameras. That's one cool thing about Fuji, I would say, is that you get all of the Fujifilm simulations from the other cameras onto this camera, and technically you only have to choose the body for the camera. Fujifilm makes really good cameras. This is one of the reasons why they've been having a lot of hype over the last couple of years, especially the X100V and the X106 as well. But you basically get all of the features on this camera for a fraction of the price that you pay on the X100V or the X106. I'd like to wrap up the review on this camera. In summary, I would like to say this camera is beautiful, it's fun to use, the dials are clicky, the material build quality is quite good. It's built of magnesium alloy. The lenses, you have a choice, multiple choice of lenses. You can change the lenses as compared to the X100V or the X106. If you're waiting on an X100V or an X106, I would suggest you to have a look at a camera like this. The only features that you miss out are the optical viewfinder on the X106 or the X100V. You miss out on the ND filters, and you miss out on the size, where it's a tiny bit bigger because of the lens. If you were to put on a lens like the 18mm f6.3, it makes the camera a lot more smaller and a lot more funkier to use. You can throw the camera into a jacket pocket or anything of that sort. Film simulations, as you can expect, you get all of them on the X100V or the X-E4. It's a joy to use this camera. I've used this camera for the last 2 years or so, taken a lot of photographs in it. It has sort of rekindled my love for photography, and I would recommend you having a look into this camera even in 2024 and as we go into 2025. This camera is quite difficult to find as of right now because Fujifilm has stopped producing these, and I think there are quite a few selling on the used market as of right now, with prices in the £1,000 or around the £1,000 range. So this is something that I would recommend you to have a look at and consider over the X100V or the X106 or even the X-E4, I would say, because it's a really fun camera to use, and this is something that you should have a look at. I would also like to compare this camera to the X106, which I have here. I was lucky enough to purchase one of these a couple months back. I would like to talk about the X106 versus the X-E4 in another video, but just a few opinions before I leave on this video. I think that the X106 is a nicer camera to use if you know what you are doing in terms of the focal length and the lens. Also, there are features like the flash and the ND filter, which may come in a bit handy if you are into that sort of photography. I would say that the build quality on the X-E4 is much superior compared to the X100V. The metal, the magnesium alloy on the top feels a lot more cooler to the touch, and it just feels more premium as compared to the brushed finish on the X106. I've understood that the X106 is manufactured in China, so I believe the quality is a bit less because they've been trying to increase the manufacturing of this camera. And I still think that the X-E4 feels like a lot more nicer build camera. Another thing is that the shutter button on the X-E4 just sounds a lot nicer as compared to the X106 for some reason. This is also a general feedback provided by some of the photographers, saying that the X106 has a very soft shutter sound and it doesn't sound as good as the X100V, but I think the shutter sound on the X-E4 sounds a lot more nicer. So thank you so much for having a look at this video. If you have any questions, please drop them down on this YouTube video, or else you can always contact me on Instagram. I'd love if you could go follow me on Instagram. I've just started out as a photographer on Instagram and Threads. Threads is where I'm currently very active because it's a really nice community. So if you could follow me on Instagram and drop me any questions that you have about this camera or about settings or things like that in the comments on YouTube, or you could send me a DM and I'll always be willing to help you out. So I'd love if you could go and give me a follow on Instagram, and if you have any more questions, please drop them down in the comments. Thank you so much, and see you on the next video.